But the threats aren't over. I've been on this network for 4 years talking about the threats coming across our southern border. And, we got a record number of known gotaways. Over 2 million people enter this country. We don't know who they are or where they came from or what their purpose to come to this country. They weren't vetted. They weren't screened. They weren't fingerprinted. We don't know who they are. And since the Border Czar and CBP arrested well over 300 people on terrorist watch list, how many of that 2.2 million who escaped apprehension, who escaped vetting, who escaped fingerprinting, came from a country sponsoring terror? Even Christopher Wray, the director of FBI, said numerous times under testimony in front of Congress that this is the biggest national security vulnerability he's seen. I agree with him. So we're not out of the woods. This country's in grave danger. We need to secure that border. And despite what's happened the last 2 days in Las Vegas and in New Orleans, this administration is not stopping.
All right, guys, welcome back. Welcome everyone on the channel to 2025. I wish that we could start under happier circumstances. But as I'm sure everyone has heard, our nation opened this year by essentially coming under attack from a variety of different places. By now, I'm sure everyone has heard about the terrorist attack that occurred in New Orleans early on New Year's Day that was done by a man who had an ISIS flag in the back of his truck. You may have also heard about this Tesla Cybertruck detonation that took place outside of a Trump hotel. Apparently, that guy is being reported to have some pro-Ukrainian sympathies. He had a bunch of guns in the back of that Cybertruck. And I first off want to start, before we get into today's video, by just saying, obviously, prayers and condolences to the victims and all of the families in the New Orleans attack. And we're all praying that everyone watching this video stays safe, because obviously it's not a very safe world anymore. But with that said, as you could probably imagine, there are a lot of different angles that we need to talk about here, and we're probably going to do a couple different videos about this string of terrorist attacks going on in America. But I want to start by addressing the debate over national security that a lot of people are now having, because let's not forget, conservatives were saying for a very long time that when you run a country like this with open borders and, a police force in many cities that is unserious about keeping the public safe, you kind of get an issue like this. Because after all, the conservatives in this country essentially predicted that something like this was going to happen.
Well, the one thing you haven't said tonight that you always say is that it's 100% certain that we're going to have a terror attack, and I agree with you on that. It's 100% certain. I mean, we're letting terrorists into our...
I pray I'm wrong. I pray
we're letting
God
terrorists into our country at a level that we've never seen before.
So that is an old clip of incoming President Trump, bringing up that, well, I mean, we have an open border. What do people expect is going to happen when obviously the United States has so many enemies across the world? The argument that liberals today are making in response is that, well, this terrorist attack was carried out by a U.S. citizen, so therefore no other questions should be asked. It's okay to have the open border because, look, after all, the attack was done by an American. But there's a little more to the story than that. And I want to play today, this is what Tom Homan had to say in response to Joe Biden after he still to this day refuses to secure our border. We'll show you that in a second. First, folks, do us a big favor. If you appreciate the coverage that we're bringing, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. You subscribing is the best way to ensure we can keep doing this work. And with that said, listen to what Tom Homan had to say today in response to Biden, the border, and why that may be potentially linked to the terror threat that the United States is now under.
The threats aren't over. I've been on this network for 4 years talking about the threats coming across our southern border. And, we got a record number of known gotaways. Over 2 million people enter this country. We don't know who they are or where they came from or what their purpose to come to this country. They weren't vetted. They weren't screened. They weren't fingerprinted. We don't know who they are. And since the Border Czar and CBP arrested well over 300 people on terrorist watch list, how many of that 2.2 million who escaped apprehension, who escaped vetting, who escaped fingerprinting, came from a country sponsoring terror? Even Christopher Wray, the director of FBI, said numerous times under testimony in front of Congress that this is the biggest national security vulnerability he's seen. I agree with him. So we're not out of the woods. This country's in grave danger. We need to secure that border. And despite what's happened the last 2 days in Las Vegas and in New Orleans, this administration is not stopping. They're still releasing thousands of people every week through the CBP-1 app, the CHMV program, and Border Patrol continues to release people in this country without proper vetting. This is not a good thing, and I can't wait for the new administration to take power and secure this border and protect our national security.
Well, the police chief was...
Yeah, I mean, all of that is completely correct. You want to talk about threats to this country, you want to talk about national security risks, maybe, especially after something like this, it should be a wake-up call that, yeah, we need to get tighter on security, obviously in other areas as well. I think that the way that the New Orleans police failed to really have a secure barricade and perimeter around the party going on Bourbon Street was also a big issue. But yeah, in the wake of terrorist attacks, it's absolutely true. Maybe keeping a border wide open is not a good idea. Now, the liberals today are going around constantly. They seem more concerned with this than the actual terrorist attack itself. They're saying, well, here's Brian Krasenstein, for instance, the New Orleans attack had absolutely nothing to do with immigration. Reason being, the attacker was an American-born piece of crap. So they're saying, stop using tragedy to push your bigotry. Because after all, if an American citizen carries out a terrorist attack, who cares if the ideology they did it in the name of was foreign? We shouldn't ask any more questions. Except people are asking a lot more questions. And it was reported, this is where I want to kind of tie in immigration to say that we don't know for sure. We're still trying to learn the full story. But this situation, this terrorist attack, may have had a little more to do with our open border than people think. Again, we don't know, but this is what we need to investigate and not just shut down the discussion. It's funny because the liberals are the ones saying, we should not rush to conclusions. And then here they are rushing to conclusions that none of this story had to do with immigration, because Fox News reported on the morning of the attack that the truck that this attacker used to carry it out actually passed through Eagle Pass, Texas, just 2 days before. Take a listen to that.
Let's bring in David Spunt. He and R. Griff Jenkins are able to report that the suspect drove a truck with a Texas license plate that came through Eagle Pass, Texas, 2 days ago. David, what else do you know about this vehicle?
So we're hearing that the vehicle was traced to coming across from Mexico into the United States at Eagle Pass, Texas, 2 days ago. To be clear, we don't 100% know that this man, and we do know the suspect is a man, was the person driving that crossed the border. That is unclear at this point. We just know that the actual license plate was picked up by a reader at a border crossing. This is per two federal law enforcement sources to Fox News, that it was picked.
See, guys, that's why I say that it is completely fair to ask some questions in this regard, because number one, Eagle Pass, Texas, if you're not familiar, is the number one hotbed the past couple of years for illegal immigration crossing into the United States. And as you heard there, obviously there is a legal immigration checkpoint there as well. The reason I bring that up, and the reason I think it's a legitimate question, if this is true, why was his truck in Eagle Pass, Texas, is because what we should be investigating, and we don't know at the current moment, but it's fair to ask, yes, this guy may have been an American citizen, but did he have collaborators? Did he act alone? Or because he was carrying an ISIS flag? That's why we should ask, are there other people who were in on this, who were collaborating alongside that? And could that have anything to do with, as Tom Homan brings up, a lot of the suspected terrorists who have literally entered our country under Joe Biden? Again, the entire thing is a little strange enough to ask questions. I'm not saying anything for certain. I'm saying that because it's reasonable to have these suspicions. These are things we should look into. And this is why, liberals, you are actually wrong in saying that, hey, this has nothing to do with immigration or the border, because as you say, we cannot rush to conclusions, right? There's enough here to say, okay, there may be some questions. It needs to be investigated. Who knows if the FBI will investigate that properly, because it is the FBI. But again, questions we should be asking. But regardless of whatever ends up coming out, whatever the truth ultimately is on how much did the open border have to do with this terrorist attack, the last thing I would say is, regardless, okay, you see a situation where there are terrorist attacks happening in the United States, there's multiple going on, there's a lot of potential for copycats. You want to be in the business of risk mitigation, right? And sure, homegrown terrorist attacks can be hard to prevent. We don't know, it's hard to kind of catch them. But one thing we can absolutely do, and is in our own control, is that we can decide against having an open border where foreign terrorists will come across. Many of them coming across are from the Middle East. They are from countries around the world that are adversarial against America. And especially when you know ISIS worldwide is kind of on the comeback, maybe you mitigate that risk or that potential for danger. And I think that is also the point here that Tom Homan is trying to make. If things are even dangerous in America with potentially domestic or homegrown threats, even if they are coming from a foreign ideology, of course, as Stephen Miller says here, Islamist terrorism is an import. It is not homegrown because it did not exist before migration brought it here. Again, so true. You just don't need to have that, right? You don't need to have that risk. And yes, when it comes to national security, Joe Biden is absolutely complicit in allowing this. And even if it did not, we don't know, but if it did not end up being that it had any role in this terrorist attack right here, we unfortunately are opening the possibility, especially with the drive now for copycats, because someone did it, so other crazy lunatics out there are maybe going to want to try to do it. It absolutely does increase the possibility that other things can happen as well. And that's not what we want to happen. So I don't know. Hopefully we can just make it to Inauguration Day without anything bad happening in the United States. And then we're going to sort this out from a serious national security perspective. Okay, we want to have a border that is secure. We want to have an FBI that is focused on actually protecting Americans and not DEI and treating Trump supporters and school board moms and Christians like they're terrorists. But I don't know. We'll have to see. With that said, though, guys, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe if you are new. And until next time, God bless and peace.